Hello and welcome.
We are in the backyard of the Yorath House studio space, enjoying these Adirondack chairs.
In the bright pink Crocs to the left is Alicia Proudfoot.
And with that smooth, debonair smile, to the right is Stephanie Florence. We are artists. So, Stephanie, how was this residency for you?
It's been an exceptional time making art in the studio and having an exploratory time within my practice. How about you?
The routine we established at the Yorath House is a true delight. To spend peaceful mornings in discussion with you that turn into industrious art making has been lovely these last 2 months.
Well, I want to hear about your art practice and what you've been making here at the Yorath House.
Let's do it. How about I go first and you go second?
That sounds excellent.
Hello. My name is Alicia Proudfoot, and welcome to my portion of the artist talk for the Yorath House Studio Project Residency. Some background information. I received my BFA from the University of Alberta and my MFA at NSCAD University. In my art practice, I experiment with multiple creative disciplines to discuss how humor affects a somatic response in themes on family and bodily experiences in illness. I'm drawn to the performative nature of breathing and use elements of satire to critique personal struggles with my asthma. A playful part of my creative process is to take on a caricature of myself, one who is exuberant and passionately invents absurd solutions to breathe better. Such tactics include transforming my asthma into an instrument, scoring music for it, building marble commodities out of it, and even making thematic decorations. I intend to untie myself from identity and illness as one thing, or at least loosen it enough to have a little fun. The 4 pieces I developed in the last 2 months at the Yorath House are connected loosely around this variable of making a vessel to breathe in or breathe through, or maybe stuff with air. I will explore exactly what that means throughout this talk and how it is addressed differently through the 4 pieces. Thank you. I started this residency with the daily heating of a needle to sew wax beads into balloons. It started with looking at pepper seeds and seeing how they compared to these wax beads that I've had everywhere for a long time. And I decided to sew them into these balloons. The latex is an inflamed red color, and my lungs find an odd kinship to their beaded, burnt pucker. There are many iterations of my beaded polyp balloons that exist as either swollen with air or constricted and empty. As vessels, these works are more interested in pattern, dangle, stretch of the surface and don't care about the effort to contain air through this needle-punctured skin. These explorations have revealed, if not started, the through line of plastic in my recent projects. And I'm curious with how such a contradictory material aligns with my interest in vessels. Our world uses plastic intrepidly. We are dependent on it to feed the hungry consumer. We can be altruistic with it to imitate transplanting of organs, and we avoid responsibility to advance depleted resources through these cheaper replicas. We use plastic to make more plastic. From its flimsy quality to its resilience in decomposition, it's promoted affordability to this lectured environmental detriment. Plastic is not a neutral material to use as an artist. In my own creative research, plastic interests me because of this adverse versatility. As a vessel, plastic can be a separate object used by the body or absorbed into the body to modify it. I think of how our water molecules have plastic involved in them now. I can't ignore the relationship I have with plastic through my inhalers, these brightly colored lovers that I scrape my teeth against to consume its pressurized air. I this idea. I've had these two lovers, inhalers, for years. Since 2002, I was diagnosed with asthma. And I refer to them as lovers because it's the longest relationship I've had. I think of Advair as a lower pitch, purple, 2 puffs a day, good listener. Ventolin is the other one, blue, very bright blue. As needed, thrill seeker, has a higher pitch. It is through this molecular exchange of plastic and air that I'm able to see a relationship between my body and plastic. I always imagined Donna Haraway's Cyborg as the traditional metal, but plastic doesn't rust into septic shock. When it's introduced into the body, there's a compatibility. And I'm interested if this discounted plastic cyborg can thrive better in the Sikh community because of this compatibility, especially to strip off identity and illness being so linked. Why not be a cyborg? Why not be a plastic cyborg? These beaded balloons are like lung portraits to me. They try to fill themselves with air despite the poked holes and the diseased-looking wax buildup. These are aesthetic vessels and act as pattern tests in a way to produce eye-catching lung products for my future projects. This notion of appearance is highly considered in consumer culture usually, but I delight in the blatant irrationality it holds when I associate it with my asthma and redesigning my lungs. The Air of Balking is a sculpture of hydroformed steel balloon letters installed high on the grounds of the Lowland Project space, just in time for this hot, thunderous summer in Edmonton. The exhibition is called In the Weeds, and these balloons welcome you to quite a playful group show. The height of the installation was definitely intentional. I think we got it about higher than 15 feet, especially with all the letters attached to an airplane cable. We had to shimmy up on either side of a ladder and then eventually ratchet it up in the trees. So this intentional height was for the audience to elongate their vocal cords and read aloud the monosyllabic ba, which mimics the involuntary sounds I make in the onslaught of an asthma attack. It is a dire sound of release, where the body can expunge air and emotion outside of itself and throw a party. I worked on these letters at the Yorath House and found such humor in gearing up all my welding gloves, all my protective equipment to saw through this metal whilst on a beautiful balcony of this residency. The floor has also served as a fantastic working space throughout the 2 months for both Stephanie and I to spread out our larger pieces. As a vessel of celebration, this piece tries to contain a good memory and inflate a balloon with all that energy. Again, balloons coming through. These are steel balloons though, so a little different, a little hefty. The title is a play on words. It is a cautionary title, advising me and others to, yes, be serious about health and taking care of oneself. But it also encourages us not to err on the side of scoffing through life or making these vocal tics of dissatisfaction, these things that weasel their way into speech. I'm learning that vessels don't always have to be physical objects. Sometimes it is the effort to hold on to something that cradles it longer. This piece has a very important interactive component where I record anyone willing to crane their necks and bleat and breathe up at these balloons. Comparing asthmatics to sheep, there is an evaluation being made here by me, about me, through this piece. Maybe it's about society, or maybe it's another advisory, not to lemming yourself in self-care, especially when it comes to personal health. I'm trying to pay deliberate attention to my health, to my asthma, through my artwork, since I started this exploration of performative breathing during my thesis. Now that my work is blanketed by this contextual weight of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become more crucial. My lungs are noisy. I have embraced that wholeheartedly. They are by far more extroverted than me and great for parties with those animal impressions alone. This piece captures the moment of having a good health day, clear lungs, and a good opening where people could gather outside after so long and just delve into the weeds of conversation. To continue this trajectory of vessels, I have been shoving my face into containers while at the Yorath House, sort of as a way to cast my face so that it merges with my respirator. My knowledge about different mold processes keeps expanding, from using alginate to a body-safe silicone for greater detail. My lungs have become a little more vocal after being submerged in Tupperware for several minutes. And throughout these last few weeks, I've gone from using bendy straws to bubble tea straws to the proper technique of coating the inner nostril with this body-safe silicone, and it's a lot. It's a lot for my airways. I feel like my asthmatic enunciations have echoed throughout the Yorath halls, christening them in a way like escape jokes for the furniture to enjoy. Humiliation is a strong conceptual interest in my art practice, and it is most prevalent with this work through the bright pink filters of this respirator that I'm replicating. They are a flat pancake circle kind of respirator, and they're designed that way so they fit under my welding hood when I work. But I imagine them as a hidden blush of embarrassment as I commit yet again to these industrial processes that affect my breathing despite the proper protective equipment. An embarrassed body is a volatile body in performance. It interrupts traditional moments of musical prowess to jitter and erupt with its own sound. Just when we wish to come across as bodiless, this body, the ill body, humiliates us or threatens to, and it is very easy to associate humiliation with failure, our illness with failure. Wayne Kostenbaum, he's an artist, writer in the States, fills a precious, obnoxiously purple book with essays on humiliation and explores its worth. I've been reading it again during the residency because I am chasing the humility of the asthmatic body in performance and recognize its visceral improvisational skills, to which humiliation is oddly welcomed. Skin becomes this living vessel in this exploration, this project, and despite its many layers, it breathes, it blushes. I'm fascinated by this thought, and by building up latex, this plastic skin, this cast of my face with the respirator, I hope to create a similar performance prosthetic that can blush and filter air through my bright pink cheeks. Beautiful Names is a lino cut of a monkey with bananas for lips, eating another banana. The image itself is elaborate, involving multiple plates and layers, but it is so joyously chaotic in its theme that I don't mind at all. Beautiful Names is a piece about redundancy, and although it has no visual components that directly imply respiratory functions or struggles with illness, it does communicate a hunger to stuff vessels. It is an image that has been stuck in my mind recently due to an adjacent conversation about how sound produced in the body must ricochet against the body to form the beautiful names of the people we cherish in our lives. Redundancy again. This piece is the beginning of a new thought about masochism in body vocalizations and ponders the breakdown of a vessel as one uses it. In connection to illness, I think of how a cough is an automatic response to reject infection. So perhaps this turning inside out of this process of sound can explore asthma in a cyclical way of rejection and acceptance. It has been a delight to share the work that I've done so far at the Yorath House. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Florence, and I'm excited to invite you into a small peek of my art practice. I wanted to start off with a light introduction. I am a non-binary individual with a great love for animals and plants. I was born and raised in Amiskwaciwa, or colonially known as Edmonton. My home is filled with plants, and I am consistently giving away young plant babies for people to enjoy and love. This is an important starting point for my artwork, as I feel intertwined with the different species of the planet. Recently, I've been acquiring plants that are close to death or drying them for future use in my artworks. For instance, my friend gave me cut flowers that were given to her for a celebration. By collecting and drying these gorgeous plants, I have been able to integrate the petals, the stems, the leaves into my paintings to produce different effects. The act of gathering materials also involves the cutting of meat from grocery flyers. Meat or flesh of another species is a medium that I've been collecting and working with for over 4 years. I strongly view the behavior of humans towards animals and the need to dominate species as cruel and vicious. A major focus within my art is to look into the human tendency to dominate landscapes, habitats, and the beings inhabiting the area. I would like to specify that this does not include all cultures, as most global Indigenous or First Nations cultures tend to see themselves as an extension of the landscape and to be one with all the beings they share their habitat with. The focus of my art practice currently combines the process of collaging, collecting, painting, and sculpting with research into how animal and human interactions interlace with evolution of viruses, agriculture, and plants. During the residency at the Yorath House, I have brought together visual and metaphorical concepts about land, plants, resource use, and interspecies connections, and above all else, ethics. In this unfinished painting called Linkage 1, Myths of Amplification, I have constructed a collaged landscape of meat and disposable ornamental flowers and plants, while a cloud of bats fly in from the distance on a polluted wind stream. This painting is the beginning of a series about integrating the untold and unknown stories of SARS-CoV-2 and how this virus becomes amplified through interspecies contact. By using elements of collage with plant matter and the meat from grocery store flyers, I am able to weave a story that focuses materially on objects and species that are devalued in the capitalist and colonial systems. I wish to make direct links between materialism and consumer choices as to how these behaviors impact the land, wildlife, and human health. The unpainted portions or additions to this painting include humans logging the ornamental flowers and plants, which theoretically could be how SARS-CoV-2 in bats first made contact with humans. Although the original SARS-CoV was introduced to humans through the amplifier species of civets, I have made humans the amplifier species in my painted tale. International travel and trade has made it possible for humans to spread SARS-CoV-2 worldwide, making them implicit to the pandemic we see today. I normally focus purely on the grotesque or the horrific when making art. I ask myself, what is outside the norms? What does society avoid? Through Linkage 1 and 2, I feel the horror comes from the unknowableness of simple actions. Diseases and viruses are unpredictable, but scientists and epidemiologists know that they're constantly evolving and piggybacking on species to survive. Ultimately, I feel that humans want to reject the fact that we are linked evolutionarily to other species. The need to dominate is prevalent and used to push back on the Homo sapiens' fear of death or the abject. I feel that humans are much like babies, often acting upon objects in their environment without thought or consideration. Adult Homo sapiens feel the need to control their environment to produce a safe and fundamentally tame habitat for their offspring. In my mind, this involves the building of cities, removal of wild habitat, and of the wildlife in whatever form that takes. In this painting, Intrinsically Linked, I explored the microscopic body of a coronavirus cell and through collage intertwined it with meat, flower, petals, and visuals of the human body. The coronavirus in this painting has combined itself with the Homo sapien DNA, and the baby head in the painting is suckling the coronavirus cell body. As meat eaters, humans have a responsibility to the food they eat, and the ways they ethically engage in their practice of gathering, as it has an impact on the surrounding world and their health as living beings. If humans go through life completely disengaged from the process of hunting wildlife and rearing domesticated animals, this will only continue the apathetic and non-engaged habits of society. Capitalism and the grocery system breeds apathy and neglect. If we neglect our food sources, water, and habitat, then we will continue to contaminate our ecosystem. I feel a strong desire to archive the major viruses of our time through my meat collage practice. I am making this small sketchbook that has portraits of zoonotic and animal-borne viruses. My fascination with coevolution and interspecies contact continues to escalate. This is a portrait of MERS, or Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, which is another coronavirus. This portrait is of SARS-CoV-2. In this microscopic snapshot, you can see the coronavirus forming a new cell to the left of the image. Both our bodies and the world around us are constantly in motion and reacting to continual change. I feel that this portrait connects the viewer to the unseen and the unknown. The next slide shows rubella, or the measles virus, interacting with the cell's DNA. The measles is slowly unraveling the DNA of the human cell to break down the existing immune system memory. It also erases the memory of the immune system, so the body is more susceptible to pathogens. This is a portrait of rubella through an electron microscope. These viruses are trying to find hosts to replicate their cells and pass their genetic material on. In some ways, the behavior of a virus is similar to the way humans treat the land and animals. This is a portrait of many macrophages attacking a virus cell. Interestingly, there are bacteria that hunt and take over virus cells. I find this particular species fascinating, as they are a predator of the virus, and they are not harmful to the host species like humans or other mammals. This is a close-up of a bacteriophage, which largely looks like a microscopic insect. The microscopic world is literally just a smaller replica of the world at our size. It reminds me of this quote from the Stephen King book called The Gunslinger. What seems solid to us is actually only a loose net held together by gravity. Viewed at their actual size, the distance between these atoms might become leagues, gulfs, aeons. I feel that this further entangles and amplifies the fact that we are interconnected. What seems impossible is not. This is a portrait of a microscopic close-up of Coxiella burnetii. This is a portrait of the Coxiella burnetii virus invading the body and infecting cells. In this collage, we are looking at rabies, which strongly looks phallic and like a jellyfish. Rabies can spread by any animal bite that is infected with this disease and needs to be treated immediately. This collage involves a portrait of Giardia, which is spread through unclean water and also has a body similar to a stingray. And here's a portrait of Ebola, which truly starts to look like a parasite or an earthworm. In this collage, we see a portrait of malaria, which is spread through mosquito contact. I find these last images the most repulsing, as the viruses look like worms or small insects. My body really finds them uncomfortable to look at or even touch. This is where the fear of death or sickness affects me as an artist, working with this subject matter. My body has a similar reaction of disgust to the portrait of Lyme's disease. Lyme's disease is mainly spread by tick bites, and both the disease and ticks are upsetting to my body personally. The tick being a blood parasite, and that a simple bite can cause such harm to the body and the immune system truly frightens me. I feel that information about diseases should be accessible so we as humans can understand how to interact in our environment safely. That being said, as humans, we need to understand that as there is less habitat for wildlife to live in, and humans encroach on the land, we will contract more diseases similar to SARS-CoV-2. Animals are adaptable, and so are viruses. I think the larger question is, can humans adapt to growing environmental and habitat concerns globally? How should humans adapt? I hope that my art practices raises these questions, and society can shift their thinking from human-centric to species-inclusive, not just for all the other species on the planet, but also for humanity's sake. The last two slides I want to include a work in process that utilizes a mannequin that I've been working on for over 2 years. I collaged a meat layer of flesh to form her skin, and while at Yorath I planted soil and houseplants in her body. I'm not 100% sure where I'm going with this artwork, but I feel that she is evolving in the right direction. She is not just flesh, she now has plant-assisted breathing, and her hollowness was filled with fresh earth. Through this residency, I feel that I've been exploring ideas of growth and healing, connecting nature with human form, which personally I find healing. This last image is of a test silicone mold that I will be using with latex to make a mask to perform with. Throughout performance in my art practice, I have merged the human form with souse or pig flesh, while I have also made wooden appendages that mimic human body parts. By using the human form with sculptural or performative objects, I am able to reiterate that we are connected to the world around us and other species. With this artwork, I hope to make a surgical mask from latex to imitate human skin, as well as potentially a prosthetic mask that covers the whole head. These are ideas that have come from watching humans adapt and change at a high pace due to the pandemic. As we become one with our new norms, how will this change our interactions? I am excited to see where this artwork takes me. Thank you for taking time to view my artwork and listen to my thoughts about my practice. The Yorath House has been an amazing opportunity for growth and experimentation in my career as an artist.
This has been a wonderful space to create in with you, Stephanie. We are thankful to the Edmonton Arts Council, the City Arts Centre, and the City of Edmonton for arranging this residency and supporting us in our artistic careers.
This residency has been a boon and so intensive. I have appreciated the way we work together and complement each other's work. I want to thank April Dean for taking time now to talk with us about our practices.
Welcome. Hello.
Hello. We're here.
Hello. We're here. We are here. My name is April Dean, and I'm here in conversation, in unplanned conversation, with artists Alicia Proudfoot and Stephanie Florence, who have graciously invited me into their studio to have a studio visit and discuss the work that they have been making over their residency. So thank you for the kind invitation. It's a real pleasure to get to know your practices a bit better and to spend this time talking about the work of making art and of being artists. And thank you for the thoughtful artist talks that landed before this conversation. It was really great to learn more about your work and your practices in that way. I think it's important in this digital time to mark the date. Today is June 17th, 2021, and is the very final day of your artist residency at Yorath House. So congratulations. I know the end of residencies are sometimes like happy, sad, right? If we could only be in artist in residence forever. Yeah. Before we dig into our conversation, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that although we are not here together, that we're meeting on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of numerous First Nations and the Métis people. And I feel a great amount of gratitude toward the many people who have called this place home for time immemorial, and for my ability to live and work on these lands. So
I think we feel very similarly.
Of course.
yeah.
Grateful, thankful.
Yeah, land acknowledgements in digital forms have taken like beautiful shape over the last year, and in really nice ways. You know, we find ourselves like together but apart, and staying grounded and connected to the places where we are, even when we're connecting digitally, has become really important over the last year.
So true.
Yeah.
So I wanna try to honor your desire to be in conversation. It's such a great goal at the end of residency, to just be in conversation about the work that you've made and that you're thinking about and that you've been doing. Certainly being in conversation with artists is my favorite thing. So it's great. So I think we'll just my intention is that we'll just move through a series of questions, and we'll just casually chat. It's just a series of 3 questions. And so we could get tangential and it could take a really long time, or we could be pretty straightforward about it. And the first question will revolve around, the function or usefulness of residency itself. The second question, I'm hoping to sort of form around a little bit more around materials, which is such a strong part of both of your practices. And then my third question is actually it's a question about questions. And so we'll get there. So I think a nice place to start is to just think about artist residency and what this time has meant for you. I think when we imagine a residency, it's one thing in our mind or in our proposal. And then as artists, when we're in it, hopefully we get the opportunity to really surprise ourselves, and to go places we could not have imagined had we not had the time, space, support, resources to be an artist in residence. Do you want to speak a little bit about just how residency has been and what that process has been like?
Yeah, I feel like this residency has opened up so much space for us to grow in our art practice, together and separately in both of our practices. Having proper funding is really hard for artists. And so this is such an amazing thing to have time to think about what we want to make and how we want to bring it together. One of the things that I noticed in my art practice was kind of like a blossoming of how I used my time, where I was moving from one art piece to another art piece, and I would take time to think about them in between, and not feeling rushed, I think helped give the work space to breathe, which is funny because our artworks are always about breath, right? Yeah, what do you think?
I find it's so curious with artist residencies, because you come into a space, it's sort of emptied out, and then you bring stuff. Like we brought these plants, we have books behind us, and just more and more, especially with the length of the residency.
Yes, 2 months.
Eating here, having tea, and then the byproducts that come even out of working on stuff that you brought, and then something else comes through it. And so I found that a lot with my stuff, where I'd bring something and then something else would just emerge.
It's so true. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever found that with residencies that you've been at, April, but I feel like when you bring things into a space, slowly it becomes more your own. I'm looking around at all this stuff in here, and it kind of becomes you feel your presence grow in the space. And then it kind of helps your art practice unfold more. And then you're bouncing off the other person's energy if there's someone else in the room with you. So
you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Artist studios are fascinating places, right? And it's so wonderful to get to be in different spaces because just like when we exhibit work, I think the spaces that we make work in shape that work as well, right? I mean, they have to. Even just the amount of space, the kind of light, you know, are we working on the floor? Do we have proper ergonomic chairs? You know, and so yeah, I think this is part of what makes residency unfold in such unexpected ways is because a part of it is sort of potentially being in a new space, and that whether we can expect it or like not is going to impact the work we make in that space, right? Yeah.
And I think it also changes, like if I was in a smaller space, I would make smaller work, right? And then we're in like a bigger space and we're sharing it. So there's kind of like this back and forth between how big our works are.
And growth into the other. Like you'll
Yeah.
have like detritus from
Yes.
one coming into the other,
Yeah.
which is always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It adds to it.
Yeah.
We've been finding little cutouts of meat
everywhere. They're in the whole building now.
Yeah.
People are going to find little sausages somewhere.
It's like the equivalent of glitter.
It's my glitter.
There should be a no glitter rule at every artist residency.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, you know, working in such close proximity with another artist, there's also this exchange of visual language and even just themes and ideas, you know, although some of that collaboration or exchange is intentional, I think also some of it is just absorbed, right, by the things that we're sort of exposed to every day, and that cohort that you're in residency with really can have a real impact on the way that you're thinking about and making work. So that's nice that you weren't all alone.
Yeah, it's really funny that you mentioned that, because we were just talking earlier today how when we met in Wells, a residency like 2 years ago at
Wells, BC.
Wells, BC, the Island Mountain Arts facility. We met there and we just clicked right away. And and my artwork has kind of shifted since meeting Alicia, and we were talking about how the humor in her art practice has kind of like made me be like, yeah, I need to like lighten up a little bit. My artwork doesn't have to be so dark and gruesome. I can bring some light into it. And that's been one of the things that I think us having such a close relationship and allowing each other into each other's art practice over the last 2 years has really had growth for me as an artist, for sure. Yeah.
And similarly, it's just wonderful to find someone that you work well with.
Oh, totally.
And just out of coincidence of one residency, and then being able to work together deliberately at this residency is just really exciting.
Yeah.
And humor is a really interesting conversation that we had just a few hours ago of like how it can sort of be a way to step back or distance from the very serious themes that we're both exploring and engage in conversation, and as a way then to collaborate. And like I think of these silicone casts that we're doing of masks and like the welding respirator versus the COVID like mask and how they just interplay immediately.
And it's funny that we've both been you were focused on the body in a very personal way, and then I am focused on the body in a more like macro way, and focused on like the whole body as a living body, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that element of humor is I also don't like immediately get to it on my own in my art practice, but have found through past collaborations with artists that yeah, just like how much pleasure and joy there can be in finding humor in art, and that it really can give people like this point of access, or like open things up. You know, contemporary art doesn't always have to be so serious. Or I guess converse to that, it can be very serious and still employ humor to sort of allow people into that seriousness. Yeah.
Almost wanting like it that sort of play of seriousness and humor, it creates a discomfort, but almost a desired or a wanted discomfort to actually engage with it.
Yeah, and it starts conversations, right? Like it can be abrupt, right? You can be like, whoa, and then you'll want to talk to somebody next to you about it, right? There's kind of a, there's definitely an engagement and like a connection that comes from having an emotion with an art piece, and then being able to share that in enjoyment. Yeah,
that's great. My next question is not fully formed yet, but I'm interested in digging into materials, because this like sense of like tactility and material is so important in both of your practices. But I'm also interested to know how material decisions get made in your practice, and if that shifted at all throughout the residency. So, you know, are you first like thinking about themes and ideas and seeking out materials, or do materials find their way to you? And maybe there's a combination of both of those things, but and then you're sort of pulling themes and ideas out of materials that have found their way to you.
For me, I've always had this very a lot of metal in my work, and that sort of came about with
like metal.
No, I'm not that edgy. But like being committed to bring this steel plate to a very like weird domestic space, even though it's a city-owned building, this Yorath House, and just, I'm going to bring my sawhorses, I'm going to bring my jigsaw, and I'm going to cut on this balcony and cut some metal, cut some balloon letters. There's that sort of, I'll bring this component. But then definitely something that I definitely noticed, especially with what I made, is this shift into plastic. And how elaborate that material is.
It's so sophisticated. Hey?
Oh, so sophisticated. Like it's been a shocking like through line through all of them. We're like, there's something with plastic, and I think what I'm going towards is how we interact with it with the body. It's in consumer culture. It's so prevalent. It's
literally in our bodies.
In our body. Yeah.
We can't get rid of it.
And that there's like that weird compatibility.
It is literally everywhere.
It's scary.
Yes.
And going from my health perspective with it, it's odd to use it and then like welcome it as a material, but also critique it in a way. Like there's a deliberate choice of using it and how contradictory it is.
Yeah, I feel like in my practice, I usually start from a theme or a concept that I'm trying to bring into my practice. And then I kind of shift it, and I try to see where it can take me. Like I've been using meat in like cutout meat and real meat at times past in my art practice. But I feel like it's been something that really inspires me to talk about. I really want to talk about othered bodies and like consumed bodies, and like in my mind, bodies are even human bodies are being consumed by the capitalist system. So I'm trying to bring out these different aspects through my materials, but then I also try to connect to the material and let it talk. And that's been something that I've been trying to do probably in the last 2 years, is talk to my material and say, what do you want to be? How can I connect with you? Where can I take you? Where do you want to take me? And that's been one of the ways that I started making the viruses out of meat, was just by going along with what happens to the meat and what happens to the animals, the othered animals in domesticated consumer processing. And a lot of the time they're horribly treated, and it breeds viruses, it breeds diseases. And it just felt like the right shift to talk about that, and it's the right time to talk about that. And then on top of that, this move into getting cut flowers. All the cut flowers were actually given to me by a friend. And I thought that was really lovely, because I didn't have to go and destroy plants. I was using plants that had kind of already been, their lives had been shortened. And so this is a way to kind of like immortalize these plants into artworks and kind of give them new life, maybe similarly to how I've planted those plants into the devalued goods, or the meat woman. And I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do, is bring all these different materials that I really love using and bringing them together in new ways. And I'm not sure where it's all going, but I know that I trust that kind of push of wherever it is taking me.
The life cycle of material is so interesting to think about too.
Yeah.
Like you're going from these like cutouts of meat and thinking of the animal.
Yeah.
And then comparing it to like a more natural, the plant, and how that sort of seeds into itself. There's a lot more moving back.
Yeah. Well, and it's that wish to talk about coevolution. Like, we have all grown together on this planet, every species, right? And so we all interact with each other in different ways, but there's still this kind of consistency. Like, things are very similar on a micro level, like and microscopically, they're very similar to how they look on our size, right? Like, seeing any kind of microscopic image is like, wow, that looks like a bug, or that, it's just it's so fascinating.
And the finding of material. When I work with metal, I always have this really interesting thing of going to a scrapyard, getting metal that way,
right.
Or this like picking through. And it always becomes such a very quiet, almost meditative process for me, of like lifting something out of the wreckage, and just quiet in my heart. And when you see just so much metal, especially Alberta, we have so much metal. It all shows this this mechanism that's sort of like feeding into just placing it somewhere. And what do you do with it then?
That wasteful society, that consumer society that just seems to toss things aside. Like the value is only good for the limited airtime that it has, right? I feel
you
like
must keep consuming, right? Like you couldn't rethink or reuse something. You must keep consuming. Yeah, there's a real ethics in materials and art making, right? And I think that's going to become it has been an important topic of conversation in art practice for a long time, and I think it's becoming more and more and more as we're in climate crisis, right? Ecological crisis. Like, how do we make decisions about materials, and what does it mean to continue making things? These are questions I ask myself all the time, right? In a world already so full of things. And I don't have any answers there, just like more questions about ethics, and like certainly surrounding plastic, but even what are the ethics of like working with plants in your artwork, right? I have to ask myself this all the time, because there are often plant fatalities, and and what does that mean if that's a practice that I continue to engage with, right?
Yeah, I feel that. I'm really always concerned about where my materials are coming from. So when it comes to like when I chose the plants to go inside of my meat lady or devalued goods, I chose plants that I had grown in my house, who I knew had like strong root systems, and ones that I knew that if like they fell apart a little bit, I could reroot them.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
that Trandoscatia will just keep,
right?
I have hundreds of them. Everyone I know gets a clipping. It'll just,
I know.
It is the gift that keeps on giving and giving.
Yeah, truly. It's amazing.
So regenerative, right? I love the idea of the plant clipping as this, like, it's this very small site of like generosity, right? This very small place where we can sort of subvert rampant consumerism. And it's like, for me, there's like a relationship there with printmaking, in that like there is enough. We can make multiples, we can make more. There's abundance, there's enough for everyone. There is no one plant. There are as many plants as people who want them, right?
I also love the idea of like with the silicone, we can keep that forever, right? Like we can make as many latex things out of it as we want, right? And so that's something that's really nice, because we first tried using alginate, and it's like 1 or 2 uses out of it, and then it's gone.
And it's for that day.
That day.
It'll dry out. It's not even like, oh, I'll do one today and one tomorrow.
Yeah, it just seems so wasteful. And it's supposedly supposed to be better because what's that word?
Safe for the skin, body safe.
No, it decomposes.
Biodegradable.
Biodegradable. Thank you. But it's I feel like in some cases, when you're working with materials, if you're going to use something often, you don't want something that's going to just degrade. But then at the end of the day, we're stuck with the silicone. And what happens when we're done with it? What do we do with it? So I think that's something that we'll have to think about when we get there in our practice. But
there's a cryptic notion of it being our face.
Yes, exactly.
Of this shell of our face.
That's awesome.
I feel confident you will find a use for it, right? Like I think it will just become part of another artwork. Which is great. So my next question is a question about questions. And in some ways you did speak about this in your intro artist talks, which is great. But I like kind of run myself in a bit of a circle about whether it's an artist's job like to answer questions with their work, like to offer information or solutions, or or if it's their job to ask questions. And I think there's potential for art to do both things, and for artists to do both things, and even the same artist can do both of those things. But I guess I'm interested to know if your practice, so when you're in like the action of making art, so not so much when you're exhibiting it, but when you're making art, if you think you're asking more questions, or if you're answering them through the act of making.
That's such a good question. I feel like in my practice, I do both. And I think in making art for myself, you know, I make it for others, but it's very personal, right? It fills a need inside of me. And I feel like I gain answers from making the artwork for myself. I don't know if it would answer questions for other people. Maybe it will help them draw some lines and like see some patterns, you know, just in the world around us, and how I've brought ideas together. Maybe they can bring their own ideas and experiences together. But I think that a lot of the time I'm posing questions like, what does it mean to be a consumer? What does it mean to live in a world where our actions are so essential, right? Like there's so much potential to each action and where it ripples. And I think that that's something that I'm really interested in. And I'm interested even in an art piece that's made, how does it ripple out? How does it affect the world around it? And I think that ethically is important too. But do I know specific? I don't know. What do you think? How does it work in yours?
I find in the way of themes that I'm interested in, they're questions I'm thinking about, looking at different tangents, different streamlines, different connections, and it's not always a quick answer. Like even if the process is quick, doesn't mean it's a quick answer to get to it. No. And it takes like an offering of, look, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm interested in. And I want to engage with you, with someone in conversation and see what their perspective is. And that's where we can take on this. Well, if you think this and I'm thinking this, where do we go from there? What is the next step? Yeah. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I really like artwork. I like that you called it an offering. That's really interesting. But I really like the idea that artwork can bridge so many subjects.
Oh, for sure.
And it can become kind of like a portal to all these different thought processes, whether it's scientific, whether it's activist, whether it's philosophical, whether it's purely about aesthetic. You know, all of these things can come together in an art piece. And I think a lot of different subjects can do that, but it's just, it just depends who's looking at it and who's gaining from it. Or
it's this odd sense of like, and how art is put into entertainment.
Yeah.
That it's something that you seek out to relax. I'm not sure, it's not just relaxing, but settle into.
Yeah.
For pleasure, for delight, or to move through in a different pace to the working pace kind of thing for people who aren't approaching this as artists. And I've always found that very interesting, because like this is our working time.
It's true.
We double as being entertained through it, wanting to do it, finding something in that. And it's always very, very, there's something very beautiful about that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's more like the entertainment aspect also can breed like this kind of like empathy. Like we're able to connect with one another and have maybe like a deeper sense of compassion, because it opens up people to have a conversation. Hopefully it doesn't shut down the conversation. And
art can find a way.
Oh yeah, art will always find something new.
I really like this reflection on like the idea of art as a portal. In that, like for me, it's this portal into like other people's sense of humanity, right? Just like, you know, I kind of like, I'm starting to get a sense of like what it is to be human from the inside of my like worldview some days. But what art does is like it can really open up what it like someone else's humanity, right? And it's like this ability to like have that access and see, yeah, just sort of like see that experience reflected in others and from others. It goes back to this idea of it being a bit of an offering as well, right? Like and especially when other modes of communication can't quite get us there, right?
Yes.
Like I often describe in art practice as like it's this thing that it's inside of me, and I need to get it outside of me,
Yes.
but I don't have the words or the language or the musicality or the movement to do that, and so I work with materials or ideas or images or whatever your medium is, but it's ultimately to try to communicate something that other tools just like won't do, right?
Yeah.
There's a vulnerability in that, to just like expose or just bring out from yourself. And it's always interesting how that vulnerability changes in process versus exhibition.
Yeah.
And like who you talk to, like talking with you in the studio while making versus talking with people who come to an opening,
right,
and exhibiting.
Completely different.
And like they're both states of vulnerability.
Yeah.
But they feed into different parts of the artwork kind of thing. Like while you're making, the conversations we have, lovely, full of life, full of thought, full of discourse, and they show up almost visually sometimes. And then in the exhibition, like having this opening with Lowlands at the same time as this residency was really interesting to bring this work from this residency and into an exhibition space where we could actually engage with people after what seems like a weird pandemic time of engagement. Right? Oh my goodness. And the conversations that come from that with people that aren't in the studio, aren't in the making process.
Well, and it's interesting, artists get so little of that, like visual artists get so little of that, and because I have the absolute privilege of working in a gallery, I get to have conversations with people about art, most days, a lot of days, and I sometimes have wonderful conversations with people. Their reflections on the work are so thoughtful and generous and insightful. And then they leave, and I feel sad that the artist didn't get to have that conversation, right? Like, I try to pass those things along, but and I've experienced this myself as an artist. Like the work goes up, and you don't even know how many people see it, and it's impossible to know how that work will continue to sort of resonate, or how people will like reflect on it or carry it with them. You can go see an artwork and not think about it for years, and then there's this image of it in your mind because you're reminded of it or something, right? That's a powerful thing to keep in mind, right? Because it's easy to lose sight of that the way that like works of art sort of spread a little bit way beyond our knowledge or our comprehension.
A humorous anecdote to that, we were talking about these balloon letters, and having now physically made that, I don't have that vocal tick in the studio anymore. And we were joking, it's like, oh, it's a ghost that is haunting that sculpture now. And somewhere late at night, you just hear this bah, bah kind of thing. So I have to make one for every vocal tick I develop now, it seems.
I imagine too, the people coming up to it as they look up and they're doing it for you, they're like, bah.
Yeah, like it just spread.
Yeah, the haunting in possession.
That's great. Literally released from your body into your world. That's great. How wonderful. So that was my last question about questions. But do you have questions? Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
It's a good question. I think that a lot of what we've talked about has been really nice because it's rounded out what we were talking about in the artist talks, and maybe let us fill in some of the gaps of how we think and work in our art practice. And it's really lovely to be able to talk about art. And even if it's digitally, I'm just so grateful to have this
the emotions
moment.
Are still there.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. And will you be leaving this residency? Like, I've had both experiences of winding up a residency and just feeling like I just burnt through every possible thing I wanted to do, and like I didn't have anything. And then I've finished residencies with nothing but inspiration and ideas and energy. And I guess I'm interested to know, like, are you wrapping up the residency feeling like motivated, like you know what's next, you're ready to move on to new work and new projects? Or are you moving into a thinking stage, or do you need time to process the things you made? Because residencies can be intensive times of production, right?
Especially packing up the studio right now. It's like we're moving, and
it's the hardest part.
There's a nomadic nature to artist residencies and studios.
It's so true. Yeah, I feel like I'm moving. I got a lot of ideas out, and I am still working through many of them. So I feel like I feel inspired to keep making and to keep working through the ideas and kind of like this collaging of materials and bringing things together in different ways. And I feel like I haven't finished talking about consumerism and othered bodies, or plant life, animal life, all of it. I feel like I'm just going to keep going through this because I'm not done with it. It has a hold of my soul. I just keep going with it.
Yeah, you can even see that kind of like shift and growth in your work though. Just like and collage is such a sort of like tactile. I mean, all mediums are, but there's something about collage where like
it's on your fingers.
Yeah, but you get kind of slick after a while, like in a really good way, right? Like it's its own technique and its own language. I think that you can only refine by repeating and doing in a way that like, I think there's like a real kind of sophistication in the way those images are being made that's starting to come out. I'm excited to see where that goes.
That's nice. Thank you.
There's something with the multiple, like the working through and adding these things, and it shows that there's so many different variations that can come from these thoughts, these explorations we're doing. And like I'm thinking of the casts, I'm thinking of the fifth layer I've printed for this lino cut. It's showing up.
I think we keep building, and I feel like we're still working with these same ideas. We're just trying to find new ways to talk about them, and as we experience life, we begin to bring in new things into the art practice, and it helps us refine what we're talking about, I guess. But I feel like both of us are still, and don't let me speak for you, but I feel like both of us are still going strong with the concepts that we have and the ideas that we have. And
there's a movement.
Yes,
I think we're moving. It doesn't have to be this heavy, fast pace either. I think there's this very careful readiness to move from this into what's next. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
How great.
Yay.
That seems like the right way
it's
to
so rare sometimes.
Project. Great. Well, thank you again for inviting me into your studio and into your practices. It's been such a pleasure to get to know your work more. And I can't wait to like get to see you in real life. I think soon, not behind this this screen.
That would be lovely.
Yes.
Very lovely.
Yeah.
I just miss touching people. It's been so nice to
It's just been
reach out.
At least you have each other. Right?
Yes,
That's
true.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again on a really successful and productive and fruitful residency. And of course, thanks to the EAC for all of their wonderful support of artists and residency in our fair city. Okay, I think we'll wrap our conversation there.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm.